The Iron Ridge hung motionless in the cold silence just beyond Mars' orbit. Its hull, scarred by micrometeorites and years of deep space hauls, caught the dim red glow of the distant planet like old rust. Inside, the air hummed with the low thrum of life support and the quiet anxiety of a six-person crew who knew something was wrong long before the alarms went off. Dale McKinney stood at the main viewport, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the black. He wasn't a soldier, just a freighter captain with calloused hands and a dry sense of humor, but he'd seen enough to know when trouble wore a polite face. 10 minutes ago, all comms had cut out. Not the usual static burst or solar interference. This was clean, surgical, like someone had simply reached in and unplugged the universe. Then, the lights flickered. Not the ship's lights, the external running beacons. One by one they winked out, as if swallowed by the void. Dale turned, heart thudding, just as the airlock alarm blared. Not an emergency breach, a controlled entry. From the aft corridor, heavy, rhythmic thuds echoed through the metal deck, footsteps that didn't match human stride or weight. He didn't run. Running was for panic. Instead, he keyed the intercom. All hands to the bridge, now, no noise. By the time the others gathered, Lena with her grease-stained coveralls, Jordan gripping a wrench like a club, two others wide-eyed and pale, the intruders were already at the door. It slid open without his command. They weren't monsters. They weren't even armed in the human sense. Tall, slender beings wrapped in seamless gray uniforms that seemed to drink the light. Their faces were smooth, eyeless, with only a faint vertical slit where a mouth might be. They moved with eerie precision, gliding more than walking, and carried devices that looked like polished obsidian tablets. One stepped forward. It raised its tablet. A voice issued forth, not from the being, but from the ship's own speakers, calm and toneless, translated into English with flawless, chilling clarity. You are hereby detained under Galactic Conclave authority. Your vessel, logs, and biological signatures are forfeit. Resistance is illogical. Lena opened her mouth to protest, but Dale raised a hand. He'd heard rumors, whispers on the outer colonies about the Conclave, ancient, powerful, self-appointed guardians of galactic order, species that mastered gravity, time, even thought itself, and now they were here, on a beat-up ore hauler. The beings moved swiftly, no violence, just cold efficiency. They sealed the crew in the mess bay, deactivated the engines remotely, and began downloading every byte of data, the ship's routes, cargo manifests, personal logs, even the crew's medical records. Dale watched through the reinforced glass as one of them tapped into the main console, fingers barely touching the surface, yet commands flowed like water. Then, without warning, every screen on the ship lit up, not with error messages or system readouts, with a face. Well, not a face, a representation. A tall, robed figure with segmented silver skin and eyes like polished hematite. It spoke, and this time the voice wasn't filtered through translation. It was real, echoing in their skulls as much as their ears. Sentient species designation, human. Origin, third planet, Sol system. Classification, level 2, primitive. Behavioral analysis, volatile, expansionist, emotionally unstable. Conclusion, unfit for autonomous governance. A pause, long enough for Jordan to whisper, "What the hell is he talking about?" Effective immediately, all human colonies, vessels, and planetary settlements are placed under permanent stewardship of the Galactic Conclave. You will serve, you will obey, you will no longer decide your own fate. This is not negotiation, this is decree. The transmission ended. Screens went dark. Silence returned, heavier than before. Inside the mess bay, no one spoke, not out of fear alone, but disbelief. They'd been sentenced, not for a crime, but for existing, labeled dangerous, primitive, unworthy. Light years away, on a quiet street in Denver, Lori Bennett was watering her marigolds when her tablet chimed. She wiped her hands on her apron and picked it up. The same broadcast played in her living room, her neighbor's window, every public screen in every city on Earth.
People stopped in crosswalks, trains idled, grocery stores emptied as the words echoed, "You will serve." Lori didn't scream. She didn't cry. She turned off the hose, let it pool on the grass, and walked inside. She pulled an old hard drive from a locked drawer, marked only with a faded sticker that read, "Mirage." She plugged it in. A single line of text blinked on the screen. Phase 1. Acknowledge the threat. She typed one word. Confirmed. Outside, the world seemed to hold its breath. But beneath the surface, in hidden bunkers, labs, and shipyards, machines stirred to life. Not war machines, not yet. Listening machines, calculating machines, machines that remembered every slight, every assumption, every time someone thought humans were too soft, too chaotic, too fragile to matter. Back on the Iron Ridge, Dale pressed his forehead against the cool glass. He watched the alien ships detach and vanish into the dark, leaving them stranded but alive. A message, he realized, not just control, but humiliation. Let them float. Let them see what happens to those who think they're free. But Dale knew something the Conclave didn't. Humans didn't break when caged. They adapted. They remembered. And when pushed far enough, they didn't just fight back. They erased the hand that tried to leash them. He turned to his crew. "We're not prisoners," he said, voice low but steady. "We're witnesses, and when we get back, we'll tell them exactly what happened." None of them knew then that Earth wouldn't wait for witnesses. It would act first, speak later, and by the time the Conclave understood what primitive really meant, it would be too late. The Iron Ridge drifted, alone, but in the silence, something new was born. Not fear, but the cold, quiet certainty that humanity had just been handed a death sentence and decided to write its own ending instead.
Earth did not respond with speeches. It did not send fleets to the edge of the solar system or broadcast angry messages into the void. In the days after the Conclave's decree, the world went quiet, not in surrender, but in calculation. Cities dimmed, not all at once, but slowly, like a body holding its breath. Streetlights turned off at odd hours, power grids rerouted, satellites winked out one by one, not from failure, but by command. To outside eyes, it looked like collapse, chaos, maybe even civil war. News networks went silent, social feeds froze, official channels posted blank pages. Panic flared in the colonies. Some surrendered immediately, hoping for mercy. Others vanished from comms entirely. But beneath the surface, humanity was not dying, it was hiding. In a bunker buried 2 miles under the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, General Carter Ellis stood before a curved wall of live feeds. None showed explosions or battle. Instead, maps blinked with red zones, areas where human presence had been erased from the record. Factories that once made cars now stamped out stealth comms arrays. Schools became data hubs. Subway tunnels hummed with fiber-optic cables carrying encrypted orders across continents. Ellis, a man who'd spent decades preparing for war with other humans, now faced an enemy that saw his entire species as livestock. He didn't smile. He didn't rage. He gave orders in a calm, flat voice that left no room for doubt. Phase 2. Disappear. Meanwhile, on the far side of the moon, inside a dome sealed beneath regolith and ice, Mia Holt adjusted the final connections on a device no bigger than a shoebox. It had no buttons, no screen, just smooth titanium casing and a single port glowing faint green. Around her, the lunar base buzzed with quiet urgency. Engineers moved in silence, faces lit by the soft blue of status pails. They weren't building bombs, they were building ghosts. Mia wasn't a soldier, she was a systems architect, one of the few who understood how alien tech thought. During the first Conclave scans, she'd noticed something. Their machines didn't just run code, they dreamed it. Their networks learned, adapted, even mimicked behaviors. That was their strength, and, if you knew how to whisper, their weakness. Her device, codenamed Echo Seed, didn't attack, it listened. Then it copied, then it changed just enough to make the system turn on itself.
A shield generator might suddenly power down, thinking it was overheating. A navigation core might reroute a ship into a dead zone, convinced it was following orders. It wasn't malware, it was mimicry with malice. She tested it on a captured Conclave drone, salvaged from a failed scout near Jupiter. Within 3 minutes, the drone shut down, then rebooted, playing a recording of a child's lullaby from an old Earth archive. Mia smiled for the first time in weeks. Terror wasn't the goal. Confusion was. Back on Earth, Lori Bennett walked through her empty neighborhood like a ghost herself. Lawns grew wild, mail piled up, but every evening she checked a small device hidden under her porch, a passive receiver linked to the hidden network. It blinked green, all clear. She wasn't alone. Thousands like her were doing the same. Teachers, mechanics, farmers, all waiting, watching, reporting nothing, because reporting nothing was the plan. The Conclave, meanwhile, grew confident. Their scouts returned with footage of deserted streets, darkened skylines, silent orbital stations. Reports declared humanity in irreversible decline. Virek, the emissary who delivered the decree, recommended redirecting resources to more stable species. The human problem, he said, had solved itself. They were wrong. In the Pacific Ocean, 2 miles down, an old deep-sea research vessel now served as a mobile command node. It relayed data between Antarctic bases and orbital decoys. In Siberia, geothermal plants powered underground data farms that simulated normal human activity. Fake traffic, fake broadcasts, fake distress calls, just enough to keep the Conclave's attention while the real work happened in silence. Dale McKinney and his crew, finally released after weeks of isolation, returned to a changed Earth. Their freighter was impounded, their logs scrubbed, but no one questioned them, no one arrested them. Instead, a quiet man in a plain suit met them at the spaceport, handed Dale a sealed envelope, and walked away. Inside was a single line: "Your testimony is noted. Stand by." Dale understood. They weren't being thanked, they were being enrolled. Weeks turned to months. The colonies that had surrendered began reporting strange issues. Food synthesizers produced inedible paste. Climate controls failed in cycles. Comms dropped during critical moments. The Conclave blamed human incompetence, but the humans knew better. Mia's echo seeds were spreading, carried by repair drones, maintenance bots, even recycled air filters. They didn't need wires. They used light, heat, magnetic pulses. Anything the Conclave's tech touched, they infected. On a remote asteroid mining outpost, Jake Riley, once a history teacher in Iowa, now led a small group of colonists who pretended to comply while sabotaging everything they could. They rerouted coolant lines, mislabeled chemical containers, left faulty tools near critical systems. Each act was small, but together they created a pattern of failure the Conclave couldn't explain. Still, Earth said nothing. No declarations, no ultimatums, just silence, and beneath it, the steady, patient work of a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, and its own worst instincts. Now it faced something new, not another human enemy, but an entire galaxy that thought it could be erased with a single decree. But humanity had learned long ago that survival wasn't about being the strongest, it was about being the last one standing when the storm passed. And this storm, it hadn't even seen the lightning yet. In Colorado, Ellis reviewed the final checklist. In the Lunar Dome, Mia activated the first full-scale echopod. In Denver, Lori watered her garden again, not because she believed in peace, but because she believed in the future after the war. The silence wasn't weakness. It was the sound of a trap closing.
The Conclave called it system instability. Their reports spoke of minor glitches, routine malfunctions, temporary setbacks. Nothing to worry about. Certainly nothing that could threaten their order. After all, humans were broken, passive, gone. What harm could come from a species that had vanished into its own ruins? They didn't know that silence had teeth. On the frozen moon of Kessar 9, where ammonia winds howled across plains of black ice, a small human outpost once used for mineral extraction now served a different purpose. Its official records listed it as abandoned, power offline, life support failed, crew evacuated.
But if a conclave patrol had bothered to land and look closer, they would have found heat signatures beneath the surface, faint vibrations in the permafrost, and the quiet hum of repurposed mining drones moving through underground tunnels like mechanical rats. Inside a reinforced chamber carved into the ice, a group of colonists gathered around a flickering holomap. None wore uniforms. Their clothes were patched, insulated, marked with grease and frost. They didn't carry rifles. They carried tools, wrenches, signal jammers, data spikes wrapped in heat-resistant foil. At the center stood a man with tired eyes and steady hands. Once he'd taught children about ancient civilizations. Now he taught them how to make alien tech forget its own name. His name wasn't spoken aloud, not for secrecy, but because names didn't matter here. Only actions did. "Patrol Delta is on approach," a woman whispered, eyes locked on a handheld scanner. 3 scout skiffs, standard suite pattern. The man nodded. "Activate Cluster 7. Deep below, in a cavern lined with salvaged conclave comms relays, a series of small devices, barely larger than coins, began pulsing with soft amber light. They had been planted weeks ago, hidden inside discarded coolant canisters left near a conclave refueling station. Now, triggered remotely, they released a low-frequency resonance tuned to the harmonic signature of the alien skiff's navigation cores. On the surface, the approaching scouts slowed. Their sleek, organic-looking hulls twitched as if confused. One veered sharply left, then stopped dead in midair. Another began circling the same ice ridge again and again, like a lost bird. The third powered down completely, sinking into the snow with a soft hiss of venting gas. No explosions, no gunfire, just silence and then stillness. This was how the Shadow War was fought. Not with banners or battles, but with patience, precision, and the quiet understanding that the best weapon against the system that thinks it's perfect is a single, well-placed flaw. Meanwhile, far above in the void between Neptune and the Kuiper Belt, something else moved. Not a ship, not in a traditional sense. A swarm of matte black pods, each no larger than a coffin, drifted in perfect formation, their surfaces non-reflective, their engines emitting no heat signature. They carried no crew, no weapons, only one thing, Mia Holt's Echo Seed, refined and weaponized. Commander Nina Peterson watched from the bridge of the Silent Path, a stealth corvette buried in the shadow of a dead comet. Her orders were simple: deploy the pods near conclave supply lanes, then vanish. No engagement, no confirmation, just release, retreat, and wait. One pod latched onto the hull of a massive cargo hauler bound for the conclave's central armory. Within hours, the hauler's internal systems began rewriting their own protocols. Security drones turned on maintenance bots, cargo manifests corrupted. By the time the ship reached its destination, it was broadcasting a looping children's song from Earth's 20th century, and its antimatter containment field was running on emergency override, dangerously unstable. The Conclave quarantined it immediately, but the damage was done. Fear had taken root. Back on Earth, the surface remained quiet, but underground, the pace quickened. Factories that once produced cars now assembled autonomous interceptors. Universities became coding hubs where students wrote logic traps disguised as routine software updates. Even old satellites, long considered dead, were reactivated, not to spy, but to relay false signals that mimicked active human colonies, drawing conclave eyes away from real targets. In Denver, Lori Bennett received a quiet ping on her hidden receiver. A single word: Voltor. She knew what it meant. Voltor was one of the Conclave's core worlds, a planet of shimmering spires and flawless order, home to their central command nexus. For months, echo pods had been drifting toward it, riding solar winds, disguised as cosmic debris. Now they were in position. She didn't celebrate. She simply unplugged her garden sprinkler, covered her receiver with soil, and went inside. Outside, the neighborhood looked as empty as ever, but in the silence, something vast was beginning to unravel. On Kessar 9, the colonists recovered one of the disabled scout skiffs. They didn't keep it. They didn't study it. They overloaded its core and left it half buried in ice, just enough for a future patrol to find, just enough to plant doubt.
Was this sabotage, or had the machine simply failed on its own? The Conclave hated uncertainty. It was the one thing their logic could not control. As weeks passed, reports piled up. Defense grids deactivated during drills. Diplomatic envoys missed meetings for no reason. Fleet coordination broke down. At first, commanders blamed human remnants. Then they blamed each other. Then they blamed the machines. The truth was simpler. Humanity hadn't disappeared. It had gone to work. And now the machines were starting to dream human dreams. Dreams of failure, of error, of rebellion. On the bridge of the Silent Path, Nina watched real-time telemetry as the first Conclave capital ship powered down mid-patrol. Not exploded, not disabled by force, just stopped, like a heart deciding not to beat. She whispered into the comms, "Phase 3 complete." No one needed to. The Shadow War wasn't one with noise, it was one with absence. The absence of control, of certainty, of the belief that the universe bent to the Conclave's will. And in that absence, humanity waited. Not for revenge, but for the moment when silence would speak louder than any weapon ever could.
The Conclave finally understood they were at war, but by then it was too late to fight back. For months they had dismissed the strange failures as random glitches, bad maintenance, or even internal sabotage. But when Voltor, their jewel world, home to the Central Command Nexus, went dark in under 10 minutes, panic spread faster than any signal could travel. One moment, the planet pulsed with light, its orbital rings humming with defense drones and data streams. The next, every system shut down. Not damaged, not destroyed, simply powered off, as if someone had flipped a switch at the heart of their entire network. No alarm sounded. No backup generators kicked in. The lights in the great towers died. The skyports froze mid-landing. Even the emergency beacons went silent. From orbit, Voltor looked like a dead star wrapped in glass. That was the moment the Conclave realized. This wasn't sabotage. It was surgery. On Earth, hidden deep beneath Antarctic ice, General Carter Ellis stood before a single red button. It wasn't dramatic. Just a metal disc set into a plain console. Around him, the war room held no shouting officers, no flashing lights, just quiet focus. Every screen showed a different Conclave world, each one blinking from green to gray as systems collapsed one by one. He didn't hesitate. He pressed it. Unleash the swarm. From hidden shipyards buried under ocean trenches, polar ice caps, and abandoned asteroid mines, thousands of autonomous craft launched into space. They were small, unmarked, and utterly silent. No engines roared, no comms chattered. They moved like shadows across the void, guided not by pilots, but by algorithms that learned, adapted, and remembered every weakness they'd found in Conclave tech. These weren't warships. They were cleaners, and their job was simple: make sure the Conclave never gave another order again. On the far side of the galaxy, a Conclave fleet preparing to enforce final compliance on a human colony suddenly lost all coordination. Their flagship's command deck went black. Navigation routed them into a dead star's gravity well. Weapons safeties locked permanently. The fleet didn't explode. It just stopped, drifted, became a graveyard of perfect machines that forgot how to function. Back on Earth, people still stayed indoors. Streets remained empty, but in basements, tunnels, and shielded labs, engineers watched live feeds with grim satisfaction. They didn't cheer. They didn't celebrate. They simply logged another system neutralized, another world isolated. Mia Holt, now stationed in a lunar command node, monitored the spread of the final echo wave, a self-replicating logic virus that didn't just infect machines, but rewrote their core identity. To a Conclave shield generator, it whispered, "You are overheating. Shut down to prevent damage." To a warship's AI, it said, "Your last order was to stand down. Compliance is loyalty." The virus didn't lie. It just reminded the machines of what they already feared: failure. And the Conclave, for all their power, had never learned how to handle doubt. On orbit above a former mining colony, a lone human drone hovered near a disabled Conclave command vessel. It didn't attack, it broadcast. Not a threat, Not a message of victory, but an old Earth recording, a child's voice, soft and clear, singing, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." The Conclave AI, already confused, tried to categorize it. Was it a weapon? A distress call? A trap? In its attempt to understand, it opened deeper pathways, and the virus poured in. Within minutes, the entire vessel powered down. On Kessar 9, the colonists emerged from their ice tunnels for the first time in months. They didn't carry weapons, they carried tools to rebuild. Above them, the sky was clear, not a single Conclave skiff in sight. Jake Riley stood at the edge of the ridge, watching the horizon. He knew the war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The enemy wasn't coming back, not because they were dead, but because they no longer knew how to come. In Denver, Lori Bennett walked to her garden at dawn. She knelt, brushed snow from the soil, and planted a single sunflower seed. It wasn't hope, it was certainty, the kind that comes after you've stared into the abyss and realized you were never the prey, you were the storm. Back in the Antarctic Command Center, Ellis received the final report. Every major Conclave world was offline. Their fleets were stranded, their networks fragmented, their leadership, if it still existed, was cut off, alone, and powerless. He turned to his aide. Begin Phase 5. Re-establish contact with colonies. Restore power grids, but keep the swarm active, passive mode only. Let them remember what happened if they ever think of doing it again. There was no grand speech, no victory parade, just quiet orders, carried out by people who understood that true strength wasn't in destroying your enemy, but in making sure they never dared to stand against you again. As the first human-made satellites reactivated, their signals pulsed across the system, not with weapons data, but with simple beacons. We are here. We remember. Do not test us. In the silent void, the last Conclave flagship drifted, its once gleaming hull cold and dark. Inside, its systems cycled through corrupted logs, trying to understand what went wrong. It replayed the child's lullaby again and again, as if searching for an answer in the melody. But there was no answer, only the quiet truth that had been ignored from the beginning. Humans didn't conquer, they endured. And when pushed too far, they didn't just fight back. They made extinction look like mercy.
The war ended, not with a treaty, not with a victory speech, and not with fanfare. It ended with silence returning to silence, only this time it was the silence of peace, not fear. On Earth, lights came back on. Not all at once, but slowly, like a heartbeat restarting. Street lamps glowed in neighborhoods that had been dark for months. Trains rolled again. Children walked to schools that reopened with quiet determination. There were no parades, no monuments raised in the first weeks. People simply went back to living, but with a new weight in their steps, a quiet knowing in their eyes. They had stared down the galaxy and not blinked. Dale McKinney stood on the observation deck of a newly commissioned relay station near the moon. His freighter uniform was gone, replaced by a dark gray jacket with no insignia. He wasn't a captain anymore, not in the old sense. Now he helped reconnect the scattered human colonies, carrying supplies, engineers, and hope to places that had been cut off during the silence. Some colonies had surrendered. Others had fought quietly, like Kessar 9. All of them needed to hear the same message. You are not alone. You are still human. He never spoke of the Iron Ridge or the day the Conclave declared them slaves. But when colonists asked how Earth had won, he'd just say, "We stopped asking for permission to exist." Far below, on the surface of the moon, Mia Holt walked away from the lunar base for the last time. Her work was done. The echo seeds had been recalled. The swarm had powered down. The final virus fragments were erased from every system. She carried no medals, no title, just a small data chip in her pocket. Her brother's last message, recovered from a Conclave archive during the cleanup. She didn't open it yet. She wanted to hear it on Earth, under real sunlight, with real wind on her face. She boarded the shuttle without looking back. Behind her, the base sealed itself,
ready to sleep again if ever needed. On Kessar 9, the ice plains were no longer empty. Prefab classrooms rose beside the old mining domes, solar panels lined the ridges, and in a new wooden building with wide windows, children sat at desks made from recycled hull plating, learning not just math and science, but history, real history, the kind that taught you what happened when you let others decide your worth. Jake Riley stood at the front, not as a soldier, but as a teacher again. His voice was calm, his lessons clear. He never mentioned the war unless asked, but when he did, he said only this: "We thought we were weak because we built gardens. They forgot gardens grow from broken ground." Back in Denver, Lori Bennett's sunflower bloomed. It stood tall in her front yard, golden and bright against the summer sky. Neighbors stopped to admire it. Some asked why she bothered after everything. She'd just smile and say, "Because it's alive, and so are we." Her garden had grown too. Tomatoes, basil, marigolds, life pushing through. One evening she sat on her porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the clouds in soft orange. Her hidden receiver sat unused in the shed. The world didn't need spies anymore. It needed builders. Still, she kept the old hard drive, not out of fear, but respect. Memory was the first shield against arrogance. Across the system, humanity rebuilt, but differently. No more blind expansion, no more reckless broadcasts into the unknown. They kept their networks tight, their defenses quiet, their eyes open. They didn't hate the galaxy. They just no longer trusted it. And when alien signals finally returned, hesitant, fragmented, from species that had once watched silently as humans were condemned, Earth's response was simple. A single message, repeated on every frequency: "We do not enslave. Do not test us again." It wasn't a threat. It was a fact, like gravity, like time. Some species fled. Others sent cautious messages of peace. A few even apologized. Earth listened, but said little. Trust, once broken, wasn't given back easily. In the years that followed, human ships traveled farther than ever before, not to conquer, but to observe, to learn, to ensure no one else suffered what they had. They carried no weapons on their outer hulls, only sensors and signals of peace. But hidden in their cores, dormant but ready, were the ghost protocols, just in case. Nina Peterson, now overseeing the Deep Space Monitoring Network, watched the stars with new eyes. She didn't look for enemies anymore. She looked for patterns, for warnings, for the first flicker of arrogance that might one day grow into another conclave. But for now, the galaxy was quiet. In a newly terraformed world near the edge of human space, a small settlement thrived. Solar-powered homes, clean water, a community garden where kids played after school. On the edge of town, a single sunflower stood by the school steps, planted by someone who remembered. The people there didn't talk much about the war. They didn't need to. It lived in the way they checked their systems twice, the way they taught their children to question authority, the way they valued quiet strength over loud power. Humanity hadn't become cruel, it had become wise. And in the quiet hum of rebuilt cities, in the laughter of children who would never know slavery, in the rustle of sunflower leaves in the wind, Earth answered the conclave's decree not with more violence, but with life itself. They had been told they were primitive, unstable, unworthy, but in the end, it was the so-called advanced species who vanished into silence, while the ones who planted gardens, told stories, and remembered each other's names were the ones that endured. And that, more than any weapon, more than any war, was the true answer to extinction. Not to destroy, but to outlive. Not to rage, but to grow. Under a clear blue sky, Lori bent to water her flowers. Somewhere far away, a ship launched towards the stars, not in anger, but in peace. and the world kept turning.
Years had passed since the conclave fell. Human colonies flourished in quiet confidence, spreading not with arrogance, but with care. Ships traveled between stars not as conquerors, but as keepers, guardians of a hard-earned peace. Earth had healed. Cities breathed again. Children grew up hearing the story not as a warning of war, but as a lesson in unity. When the universe calls you weak, sometimes the strongest answer is silence, followed by action. But the galaxy was vast, far vaster than even the conclave had known. Deep in the outer rim, beyond the mapped systems and forgotten ruins, something ancient stirred. It had watched, not with eyes, but with patience older than stars. It had seen the conclave rise, arrogant, rigid, blind to the chaos of life. It had seen them fall, not to fire, but to the quiet cunning of a species that planted gardens while building ghosts. And now it turned its attention to Earth. Not with fleets, not with proclamations, but with a single signal. On a remote monitoring outpost near the Oort cloud, a junior technician named Eli Garza noticed the anomaly during a routine sweep. A narrow-band transmission, repeating every 37 seconds. No known origin, no modulation matching any known species. It carried no words, no threats, just a sequence of prime numbers, followed by a sound, the faint, clear echo of a human heartbeat. He reported it immediately. Within hours, the data reached Commander Nina Peterson, now Director of Deep Range Observation. She listened to the recording alone in her office, the soft thump-thump filling the room like a secret. It wasn't random noise. It was recognition. Someone or something knew what a human sounded like from the inside. Earth's High Council convened in silence. No panic, no grand speeches, just careful eyes and steady hands. General Carter Ellis, older now but no less sharp, reviewed the signal's trajectory. It came from a dead zone, a region of space marked empty on every chart. Yet the signal grew stronger each day. Lori Bennett, now an advisor on first contact protocols, sat in her Denver garden under a clear night sky. She held a small stone in her palm, smooth, dark, found years ago in the mountains. "They're not testing us," she said, quietly, to no one. "They're asking if we're ready." Ready for what? No one knew. But humanity remembered its lesson. It did not broadcast replies. It did not send scouts racing toward the unknown. Instead, it did what it did best. It watched. It listened. And it prepared, not for war, but for understanding. Mia Holt, working from a research station on Titan, began analyzing the heartbeat pattern. It matched no known human, yet it carried the same rhythm, the same fragile cadence that said, alive. She wondered, was it a message, a mirror, or a warning from another species that had once faced its own conclave? On Kessar 9, Jake Riley showed his students the signal during a history class. He said, "This is how it starts. Not with fire, with curiosity. And curiosity can be the beginning of friendship or the first step toward another war." He taught them to ask questions, not assume answers. Dale McKinney, now captain of the long-range vessel Silent Horizon, was assigned to patrol the outer edge, close enough to observe, far enough to retreat. His ship carried no weapons, only sensors, archives, and a recording of Earth. Birds singing, rain falling, a child laughing. The signal continued, steady, calm, waiting. Some feared it was a trap, others believed it was hope, but humanity, shaped by silence and forged in shadow, chose neither fear nor blind trust. It chose awareness. In hidden shipyards, engineers updated the ghost protocols, not to destroy, but to translate, not to erase, but to speak. If this new presence meant peace, Earth would answer in kind. If it meant danger, Earth would not be caught unready again. One evening, as the sun set over the Pacific, Lori stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean. She held a small receiver tuned to the signal.
The heartbeat played softly in her ear. She closed her eyes and whispered, "We're listening." Back in orbit, a new fleet of observer drones, sleek, silent, shaped like falling leaves, prepared for launch. They carried no weapons, only questions. And far beyond the edge of known space, the watchers waited, not to judge, not to conquer, but to see what a species that answered slavery with extinction would do when offered something far more dangerous, a hand in the dark. The galaxy was not empty, and humanity, once thought primitive, was no longer alone. But this time, they would not be the ones declared slaves. This time, they would decide what came next.